They've been lying to you your whole life about what intelligence really means. They made you believe it was a test score, a report card, a diploma on your wall. They convinced you it was about memorizing facts or solving equations faster than the next person. But that was never the truth. Real intelligence isn't what they taught you in classrooms. It isn't about appearing educated or impressing others with fancy credentials. Real intelligence is power. It's leverage. It's your capacity to bend the world to your vision before the world crushes you beneath its weight. The great tacticians throughout history understood this. While everyone else was obsessed with looking brilliant, the truly powerful were focused on becoming unstoppable. There exists a ladder, an invisible hierarchy of mental evolution that determines who controls and who gets controlled, who rises and who remains trapped forever. The majority of people, maybe 9 out of 10, never escape the bottom step. They exist inside a cloud of confusion. They believe they're making decisions, but they're simply following programming someone else installed in them. Then there are those who ascend. 7 distinct levels of intelligence exist. 7 stages of awakening. Right now, we're going to tear down every illusion you've been fed. We're going to hold up a mirror to your mind. This won't be comfortable. It might hurt, because you're about to discover exactly where you stand in this hierarchy. And once you understand how this works, there's no going back. The people you see every day will look different. You'll notice the invisible chains controlling their movements. You'll recognize the emptiness behind their eyes. The real question is, do you have the courage to find out where you belong? Look at the world around you. Actually observe it. Watch the crowds flooding the streets during peak hours. Study the expressions on the train. Notice the people waiting in checkout lines. What do you notice? You're seeing the dormant ones. This is the first level, and it's where most humans remain their entire lives. The dormant person isn't necessarily unintelligent. They might possess impressive credentials. They could be medical professionals, attorneys, financial experts. They might quote literature or write complex software, but in essence, they're unconscious. Intelligence at this stage is completely automatic. The dormant person doesn't initiate action. They're acted upon by external forces. Their existence is nothing but programmed responses to stimuli. The alarm sounds, they rise. The authority figure gives orders, they comply. The media tells them what to think, they accept it. The advertisement appears, they purchase. They're convinced their thoughts belong to them, but challenge them. Ask why they hold their beliefs. They'll collapse immediately. They'll recite something they scrolled past online. They'll repeat what their family conditioned them to believe. They're containers carrying other people's programming. This category of humans will always allow themselves to be manipulated because they cannot resist immediate impulses. The dormant person has no real control over their life. Everything exists outside themselves. Whatever happens is always someone else's responsibility. The system, the politicians, their partner, random chance. Their victims floating downstream, refusing to grab the oars. Deep down, the dormant person fears independence. Freedom terrifies them rather than liberates them. If you removed all structure from their life, they'd panic. They desperately need someone to tell them what's acceptable, what's forbidden, and what comes next. This explains their obsession with group consensus. They need majority approval before feeling safe about any opinion. They scan reactions before forming their own view. They follow trends before making any choice. Their deepest fear isn't being incorrect. Their deepest fear is standing isolated. You know exactly who these people are. You encounter them daily. You might share DNA with them. They're extras in the film of civilization. They occupy space. They generate noise, but they leave nothing behind. They're fuel. They power the machines constructed by superior levels of consciousness. They consume. They produce. Then they're discarded. If you're at level 1, you probably wouldn't be watching this content. The platform doesn't serve this kind of darkness to unconscious minds. But if you were dormant and you're just beginning to stir, understand something. That uncomfortable feeling, that persistent sense that you don't own your own life, that isn't mental illness. That's reality piercing through the fog they've kept you in. When a dormant person awakens, they don't instantly gain wisdom. They become noisy. They enter the second level, the imitator. The imitator has discovered that existence is a performance. They realize that appearing intelligent brings respect, social standing, and approval. But they haven't developed independent thinking yet, so they appropriate the thoughts of others. The imitator is the pseudo-intellectual. They're the person at social gatherings using elaborate language they barely comprehend. They're the online activist embracing whatever cause is trending, not from genuine conviction, but to broadcast their virtue. They consume summaries instead of actual books. They reference profound concepts they've never personally explored. At this second level, intelligence becomes theater. It's a disguise. The imitator is consumed by the image of being smart. They accumulate credentials and certifications and impressive titles like collectors hoarding trinkets. They need you to acknowledge their brilliance. They crave the validation. This is the most hazardous level for your sense of self because here, you feel superior to the dormant masses. You look down with contempt. You think those mindless followers, but I'm awake. Except you're not awake. You're just experiencing a different type of sleep. The imitator is caught in overconfidence despite incompetence. They know enough to feel like authorities, but not enough to recognize how much they don't understand. This type confuses the performance of wisdom with actual wisdom. The imitator believes if they resemble a leader, they are one. If they sound philosophical, they must be a philosopher, but push deeper. Confront an imitator with an unfamiliar challenge. Ask them to construct something original from nothing. They'll freeze because they cannot generate. They can only replicate. They're an echo, a shadow. The tragedy of the imitator is their addiction to outside approval. Their entire worth depends on acceptance from the intellectual circles they aspire to enter. They're terrified of being revealed as imposters. This makes them inflexible. It makes them defensive when questioned. If you constantly find yourself needing to prove your correctness, if you memorize talking points to dominate arguments instead of pursuing actual truth, you're trapped at level 2. You're a mimic. Loud, colorful, capable of repeating words but incapable of original thought. This is where things get serious. When you stop performing and start observing reality without filters, you rise to the third level, the strategist. This is the cunning predator. The strategist has abandoned the need for validation. They no longer care whether others perceive them as intelligent. They care about results. This is where genuine agency begins. The strategist examines the world, the regulations, the morality, the social agreements, and realizes none of it is absolute truth. These are arbitrary constructs, and constructs can be manipulated. One must recognize dangers like a fox and intimidate threats like a lion. The strategist is the fox. They spot the traps. They comprehend incentive systems. They study their employer, their relationships, their government, and they ask what motivates them. What frightens them? How can I leverage this? Intelligence at level 3 is purely transactional. It's calculating, it's tactical. The strategist is efficient. They climb hierarchies not through effort alone, but through superior maneuvering. They understand who to compliment and who to disregard. They know when to speak and when silence serves them better. But the strategist often exists in isolation. When every interaction becomes a calculation, you eliminate authentic human connection. You begin viewing people as game pieces. And while this grants you power, it also breeds constant suspicion. The strategist is always watching for threats because they assume everyone else operates like them. They project their own manipulation onto the entire world. They trust nobody. This is the prison of level 3. You become trapped by your own tactics. You're so consumed with playing the game that you forget to actually live. You're effective, absolutely, but you're empty inside. Many powerful executives, political figures, and opportunists plateau here. They have wealth. They have influence, but they have no inner peace. They're locked in endless cycles of threat assessment and opportunity scanning. They're the sharpest person present, but they're still responding to circumstances. They're still operating within someone else's framework. They're winning the competition, but they're not free from it. To ascend higher, you must stop merely protecting yourself. You must become an elemental force. The fox is clever, but the fox hides. Level 4 is the commander, the lion. The commander transcends simple calculation. They add a new dimension, will. The strategist attempts to navigate safely. The commander attempts to reshape reality through sheer force of character and capability. This is the level of supreme authority. The commander doesn't just observe the pieces. They move them with absolute certainty. They don't fear confrontation. They thrive in it. It's better to be feared than loved if both aren't possible. The commander embodies this. They're willing to make brutal decisions that those at lower levels are too afraid to make. They accept the weight of leadership. At this level, intelligence becomes creative. You're not just exploiting existing opportunities. You're generating new ones through execution. People follow the commander not because of manipulation like the fox employs, but because they represent stability in chaos. They're a beacon. They possess a vision and the iron discipline to march toward it, pulling everyone else along by force if necessary. But the lion has a critical weakness: exposure. The commander is visible. They stand at the forefront. They receive glory, but they also absorb blame. They're a constant target because they rely on force and presence. Their power connects directly to their physical stamina. If they falter, everything collapses. If they display vulnerability, the predators circle. The commander is exhausted. They carry crushing responsibility. They believe they're the ruler, but they're actually the most valuable servant. They're enslaved to their own ambitions. They think power means doing, controlling, being visible. They haven't yet learned the deepest truth about power, that the most dangerous forces are the ones nobody sees. Now we enter forbidden territory, the levels they don't teach anywhere, the levels that moralists fear. Level 5 is the manipulator. If the fox is clever and the lion is powerful, the manipulator is invisible. The manipulator has realized that direct control, level 4, is wasteful. It creates opposition. When you force someone, they resist. When you command someone, they resent you. But if you make them desire what you want them to do, you own them completely. This is invisible influence. This is control through suggestion. The manipulator doesn't stand in the spotlight. They stand in the darkness behind it. They whisper instructions to the lion. They understand the deepest mechanisms of human psychology. They know humans are driven by two fundamental forces, desire and fear. They don't fight against reality. They seduce it. The manipulator constructs stories. They engineer situations where the outcome is predetermined, yet everyone believes they chose freely. They're masters of maintaining innocence. If something fails, their fingerprints are nowhere. If it succeeds, they collect the rewards. They operate through intermediaries. They use the dormant, the imitators, the strategists, and even the commanders as extensions of themselves. Everyone sees your appearance. Few experience your true nature. The manipulator lives this principle. They're shape-shifters. They become whoever necessary to achieve their goals. They have no fixed persona. They're water. To the dormant, they're a companion. To the commander, they're a friend. To the strategist, they're a trusted advisor. To everyone, they're a collaborator. None realize they're being steered, but level 5 demands a terrible cost: fragmentation. When you spend your existence wearing disguises, you forget your actual face. When you treat every human interaction as psychological warfare, you lose the capacity for genuine connection. The manipulator is powerful, yes, but they're a phantom. They move through existence, but they're not part of it. They're cold, colder than the strategist. They observe humanity with the detachment of a researcher studying microorganisms. They can predict behavior. They can direct it, but they cannot join it. This is the isolated peak of control. Most practitioners of dark psychology stop here. They believe this is the summit. They think being the invisible hand represents ultimate power. They're mistaken, because the manipulator is still engaged in the game. They're still moving pieces. They're still reacting to the board. The true master doesn't play. The true master owns the entire establishment. This is the level of the creator. The architect doesn't manipulate individuals. They design environments. They understand that human behavior results from environment. If you want people to move in a specific direction, you don't ask them. You don't trick them. You construct the pathway. The architect builds the pathway. They create frameworks, belief systems, organizations, algorithms, movements, civilizations. They establish the rules of the game that everyone below, the dormant, imitators, foxes, lions, and manipulators, are all competing within. While the fox steals fruit and the lion fights for the harvest and the manipulator convinces someone to surrender the fruit, the architect owns the entire orchard. This is systems-level intelligence. It's the capacity to think in cascading consequences across multiple generations. The architect thinks in decades and centuries, not quarterly reports. They're detached from individual victories because they've predetermined the entire conflict. Consider the creators of digital platforms. They're architects. They don't care what you debate. They don't care which ideology prevails. They constructed the arena. They profit from the engagement. They profit from the division. The architect isn't evil. They aren't virtuous. They're inevitable. They observe the chaos and recognize patterns. They see the underlying code and they rewrite it. To reach level 6, you must release the desire for personal recognition. You must release the desire to control individuals. You must fall in love with structure itself. You must become a scholar of civilization. You must master economics, psychology, history, and science and synthesize them into unified understanding. The architect is extraordinarily rare. Perhaps 1 in 10 million reaches this plateau. They're the names that echo through history, not the warriors who fought the battles, but the minds who designed the systems that made conflict inevitable. But even the architect hasn't reached the final level, because the architect remains attached to their creation. They still care whether the system functions. They still have ego even if projected into their work. If their system fails, they suffer. There exists one level higher, a level that transcends humanity itself. The ultimate level of intelligence isn't about accumulation, it's about elimination, it's the emptiness. At level 7, you stop being the player, you stop being the designer, you become the silence. This is absolute internal sovereignty. The void has mastered the ultimate trait, complete emotional and psychological detachment from external reality. They own nothing yet possess everything. They have no fear because they have no attachments. You cannot threaten someone who doesn't care whether they exist or cease existing. You cannot bribe someone who desires nothing you possess. You cannot manipulate someone with no ego to inflate. The void observes the architect's systems, the manipulator's schemes, the lion's conquests, and the fox's deceptions, and they smile. They see it all as theater, a cosmic entertainment. This isn't despair or meaninglessness. This is transcendence. The void operates with absolute clarity because desire doesn't cloud their vision. They do precisely what's required, nothing beyond, nothing less. They're like water. You attempt to grab them and they flow between your fingers. You attempt to strike them and they reform. You attempt to destroy them and they transform into vapor only to descend upon you later. Half our lives are governed by chance and the other half by our will. The void has synchronized their will with fate. They don't resist the current. They become the current. In ancient wisdom, this is the way. In classical philosophy, this is the sage. In dark psychology, this is the apex predator. Because if you encounter someone at level 7, you're powerless. You cannot read them. You cannot anticipate them. They reflect whatever you project. They're a mirror. When you look at them, you only see yourself. They can descend to level 4 to command armies, then return to the void. They can play the fox during negotiations, then return to the void. They utilize the other levels as instruments, but they don't inhabit them. They live in the impenetrable fortress of their own consciousness, a fortress without entry points. This is absolute freedom, freedom from the need to be anyone. And paradoxically, this is where ultimate power exists, because the person who needs nothing controls everything. Now the mirror faces you. Where do you exist in this hierarchy? Be brutally honest. The lie you tell yourself costs more than any other deception. Are you dormant, drifting, reacting, waiting for someone to grant you permission to live? Are you an imitator, chasing approval, memorizing phrases, pretending to comprehend? Are you a strategist trapped in endless competition, suspicious, transactional, isolated? Are you a commander, depleted, carrying impossible burdens, a target for everyone? Are you a manipulator, hiding in shadows, losing yourself to the masks you wear? Are you an architect, building systems, obsessed with leaving a mark? Or are you approaching the void? Most of you fluctuate between level 2 and level 3. You're aware enough to know the game exists, but you're still seeking validation at level 2. Or you're trapped in transactions at level 3. That's acceptable. Awareness marks the beginning of ascent. But understand this, the system is designed to keep you imprisoned. Education is designed to keep you dormant. Higher education is designed to make you an imitator. Corporate structures are designed to trap you as a strategist. They don't want architects, and they're terrified of the void. If you want to climb, you must move against every instinct your biology and society programmed into you. You must destroy the part of you that craves acceptance. You must destroy the part of you that craves safety. You must accept that intelligence isn't about being pleasant. It isn't about being correct. It's about being effective. It's about seeing the code beneath reality. So how do you ascend? You don't climb by accumulating more data. You climb by stripping away illusions. To move from dormant to imitator, you must awaken to the value of knowledge. To move from imitator to strategist, you must stop caring about opinions and start caring about results. To move from strategist to commander, you must cultivate courage and embrace responsibility. To move from commander to manipulator, you must learn subtlety and psychological mastery. To move from manipulator to architect, you must learn systems thinking and patience. To move from architect to the void, you must release everything. It's a brutal journey. It's a dark path. Most people retreat. They prefer the safety of the crowd. It's comfortable surrounded by others. It's freezing at the summit. But the perspective transforms everything. When you stand at the peak observing the chaos below, you realize that all the anxiety, all the conflict, all the manipulation, all the chaos, it was always just a performance. A performance you no longer need to participate in. You can simply observe. And in that observation, you discover the only thing that truly matters: mastery over yourself. But there's a specific technique, a psychological key that unlocks the transition from level 3 to level 4. It's the most difficult barrier to break. It involves a concept called ruthless adaptability. Not virtue in the conventional sense, but a fierce, flexible capability. Most of you will plateau at level 3. You'll be intelligent, successful foxes, but you'll always fear the wolves. You'll never become the lion. You'll never build the empire. Why? Because you still believe in the rules. You think if you're clever enough, the rules will protect you. They won't. The secret to breaking through, the secret to entering the realm of the architects and the sovereign requires a fundamental break in your moral conditioning. You must be willing to do the one thing society tells you is unforgivable. I cannot explain it completely here. The platform won't allow it. The dormant masses would report it. It's too dangerous for public consumption. If this awakens something in you, understand this is only what I can reveal publicly. There are things I cannot share with everyone. There are aspects of dark psychology that I simply cannot discuss openly on this platform without being silenced or punished. The algorithm suppresses the most powerful knowledge. Those exist behind restricted access. If you're still here, you're different from the others. Subscribe if you haven't. But if you want what's hidden, join the inner circle and step into the architect level. You'll access exclusive, unrestricted content that explores the deepest chambers of human consciousness. Most won't take that step. That's exactly the point.